My name is Greg Herman. I am an associate professor of architecture at the University of Arkansas's Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design. My official title here at the house is Director of the Fay and Gus Jones House Stewardship. In 2015, the Jones daughters donated the house to the university and to the school. And we were really thrilled about that. There were developers that were chomping at the bit to get at this property. So this would have been an endangered property. So we're very happy that the daughters donated it. They thought that the best way to preserve their parents' legacy would be to preserve this house. And so it was. This house is, for the most part, how Fay designed it and how they moved in 1956. This was not entirely a conventional house. I would never tell people that the door is in the back, but the door isn't in the front either. Fay felt it was important to experience the site, that there's a procession that you move on very deliberately. There's a choreography from arrival onto the site, through the carport, around to the door, into the house, and up and around until you come to the treehouse space up above. This house is an expression of the cave in the treehouse. The lower level of the house is the cave. It's very compressed, hence the low ceiling in the carport. It's much cooler than the rest of the house, especially in summer, which is appreciated. The light comes from different directions. The light is primarily from above in the rock room, in the room that we're sitting in right now. If you look at the earliest sketches of the house, this space wasn't designed like this at all. When the house was under construction, the contractor said to Fay, "Look, we've hit rock, and you have a couple of choices. You can either redesign the space or we've got to do some blasting. Those are the two options." And Fay says, "We'll go with option 3. We'll include the rock in the space." So that's the space that we have right now. When you are in this space, you are inside, but you are literally outside as well. The table that I'm sitting at was Fay's first office until he grew out of the space, which was pretty quickly, and moved downtown. Fay would sit here to sketch. Fay met with folks down here. The daughters used this as a lounge space. At times in the life of this house, this space has been much shaggier with a lot of things growing. The ferns, which are still there on the rocks, have at times been much thicker. Even been coming up through the floor at times. They've had plants in this space. So it's really kind of a glade. It's very natural and just the way Fay liked it. Across the hall is the room that was designed for Cammie and Janice. It's a pretty substantial space in this not very large house. They slept toe-to-toe along the edge of the storage unit that was built in there. People do notice in that space is there's a fireplace. Now, I don't know if any of you had a fireplace in your bedroom when you were a child. I did not. The daughters did. If you really think about it, just the stone floor just goes straight into the fireplace without any articulation. And so when the daughters would sit around the fire, it's almost like they're at a campfire. So there's more of this idea of bringing outside inside. I think they enjoyed their room. I think that it was perhaps difficult at certain times of their youth to be in a space that was so much on display. The glazing that leads to the main entry is in their room, and the glazing that faces the carport, and the windows that face out the front of the house. There was perhaps less privacy in that space. Well, they had different ideas of privacy in this house, and that's something that I want to talk about with their bedroom upstairs. The upper level of the house is the treehouse. The space is much loftier, much higher. The color palette changes. It's much lighter. The light floods in from the sides, from the glass. So when you get to the top of the stairs, the first thing you're presented with is the volume of space. And that's where Frank Lloyd Wright stopped and looked at the space and said, Fay, I think, I'm going to give you a certificate. This space really works. And then you start to look around that space. Now, when I'm upstairs, I tell people that there's more architecture per square foot in this house than you're likely to see just about anywhere else. Gus referred to this house as Fay's experiment. And experimental it was. There's a lot going on up there. It's not a large house, but when you're upstairs, it's very spacious. It's one big space with not a whole lot of articulation, one space to the next. The footprint of the house is basically just a rectangle, but you don't have a sense of that when you're up there. Instead of having this conventional rectangle of space, you have things moving around, soffits shifting, changing. You notice details like the ridge beam that normally you'd expect to see in the center is pulled off to the side, and it's exaggerated in dimension so that it hangs down. So that detail, the voided out gables at either end where there's glazing and mirrors where you might expect there to be a support. So again, your understanding of the space has changed. There are light soffits up there, two different kinds of light soffits, the ones at the north and south ends and the ones on the east and west sides that were used just for lighting of the ceiling. You very rarely see the source of the light in this house. There are fixtures on the walls and a few ceiling fixtures, but the primary way of lighting the spaces in this house is with hidden sources. The fireplace is surprisingly large for a house of this size. It's very high and it's very wide. The fireplace is on the edge of the space that Fay and Gus used for their bedroom. I hesitate to call it a bedroom. It's a bed space. When I have students here, I like to ask them, where do you think Fay and Gus slept? They'll look at the light soffits and think, well, maybe they were up there, or is there some room off that way? And so I walk over into their space. I said, nope, it's right here, right? Completely open to the living space, with a baby grand piano in it. Why would they do something like that? Well, the reason one has to surmise, now thinking back to changes in domestic space after World War II, how are people using this space? Well, the Joneses entertained a lot. That primary bedroom, if it had been in fact a defined room, would be a waste of space given how much use that space gets during the day, so that their sleeping space became an extension of the entertaining space of the house. They had a piano in there. Folks would play. The bed was just additional seating. And that's how they lived for half a century. The DNA of all of Fay's subsequent projects can be found in this house. Pretty much everything he did has its start in this house. That's why, for me, this is my favorite Fay Jones house. It's a really wonderful early expression of Fay's intentions. I have never been here with a group where someone doesn't say wow when they come in the door. And this house is 69 years old, right? And people are still saying wow when they come in the front door. That's some pretty strong architecture. When Fay decided it was time to leave Taliesin, he contacted John Williams, who had founded the architecture school. John offered him a teaching position here in Fayetteville, and the entire family came here in 1953. Fay at this point is 32 years old with a wife and 2 kids. Once they were here, Fay connected with a developer to look for a place to build a house for his family, and also as a demonstration house for his capabilities. The developer had 2 sites outside the city of Fayetteville at that time, out in the county, and he engaged Fay. The south lot would be the first house built. If affordable as constructed, Fay would purchase the house from the developer, and it would be his family house, and he designed it as such. The budget for the house was not more than about $12,000 in 1953. That's a fairly typical budget for a house at that time in this place, especially when you consider that Fay's annual salary at the time was about $4,000. There were no construction documents prepared for this house. The builder relied on sketches, and they relied on Fay being on site every day. Now, why is the budget discussion relevant? Well, the price as it was completed was about twice the original budget. Nonetheless, the Joneses were able to work out financing and moved into the house completed in 1956 with no furniture, but they moved in 1956. The second house to the north began construction at the same time this house began construction. And I have no way of proving this, but it's my belief that the reason that the work on that house was stopped, because it was stopped, and when we look at that site, all you see is the stonework. The builder saw where this house was going in terms of budget, and he stopped work. There could be any number of reasons why he stopped work on that, but the fact of the matter is that work did end on the second house and never resumed. We built a model of that house based on sketches. Just sketches on yellow trays that we found in the file. We did have to extrapolate a little bit of it and think, okay, what would Fay have done here based on what's going on in this house? We're kind of happy that the second house wasn't built because when you look at a model of it, it was a 1-story house, very low. And there's a lot of slope here. So the roof of that house would have been visible and come right up to the wall of this house. So it looks almost like there's an on-ramp to an interstate at the house next door. So having that be green and maybe a little enigmatic gives a little bit more mystery to this house, which I appreciate. In 2004. After Fay passed away, the family was able to purchase that lot. It had remained in the builder's ownership almost 50 years. So that is part of this site. What I think is valuable about the ruins, as the Joneses called them, even though they're more of never was than a ruin, is that it gives students an idea of the syntax of construction, that the stonework came first, and the framing of the house came around that, was built around it. And so I think that the house and the ruins next door are valuable as instructive tools. After all, this is a university property now, and we do use it as part of the architecture program. In 2015, the Jones daughters donated the house to the university and to the school. When we received the house, and Dean McKeith then formalized my relationship with the house by giving me the title and encouraging scholarship, encouraging the use of the house as a tool for historic preservation. So therefore, beginning in 2015, we looked for ways to improve the house, to restore it. Fay had been ill in his last days. Mrs. Jones, Gus, hadn't lived here in 5 years when the house was donated, so there really hadn't been any significant repairs to the house in at least 15 years, maybe even longer. So the house was really ready to be worked on. The university was able to secure a significant grant from the Arkansas Natural and Cultural Resources Council, the ANCRC. And in addition to that, we had some significant contributions from Fay enthusiasts, and the School of Architecture kicked in a good amount as well. We had a good-sized war chest for the restoration of the house. It is amazing how not far that significant war chest can go. We replaced the roof, we replaced the ceiling upstairs, the entire floor down here was lifted. There was some frost heave in the floor. Materials weren't replaced, but they were conditioned a little bit, freshened up. When we inherited the house, there was a kind of a goldish yellow shag carpeting throughout upstairs, which was not original, and we took that out. So we refinished the floor upstairs. It looks great. Took care of, plumbing, the electric, the mechanical, all replaced, and are good for another 50 years. Obviously, I'm faculty in the School of Architecture, and my primary objective is to get students involved and to be enthusiastic about anything. But as soon as we had this house, it really got the students excited. We bring students here all the time, several hundred a year, and that's only increasing. The first thing we did here in 2010 was prepare a set of drawings for the Historic American Building Survey of this house. And it was the first time this house had been thoroughly drawn in the entire lifetime of the house. I might add that we won first prize nationally from HABS for the preparation of the drawings. And so that started my formal relationship with this house. Fay stayed close to Wright. Wright visited here in 1958, his one visit to Fayetteville, and of course he came to this house. In his lecture at the university, Wright mentioned to the students that y'all should go and look at Fay's work. And so this started a steady stream of not only students, but folks from the community, outside the community, in the architecture community around the country, maybe even around the world, coming to visit this house. So there was a lot of traffic here. And this house is on the National Register, so it's a recognized historic property. We're on lots of tours, commercial tours that come to Northwest Arkansas to look at architecture. Of course, they go to Crystal Bridges. Sometimes they'll look at the work of Marlon Blackwell, and quite often they want to see, and they'll go to Thorn Crown, but quite often they also want to see Fay's own house. One of my objectives is always to bring the work of Fay Jones and this house especially to new audiences. We're on the cusp of being included in the Iconic Houses Network, and it's really a quite distinguished group of houses. They've expressed interest in this house, and I think we're going to be able to do that. I do enjoy it.